Hey everyone, welcome back. We're in Module 4. We're going to go over your Module 4 activity. This activity is focusing on turning the finalized question that you have into a hypothesis. And there's a couple of things you need to know about hypothesis. They need to be testable and also falsifiable. We'll talk about what that means in just a second. So click on the Module 4 activity, click on the requirements and rubric, just like we've always done. And then we are given some information about how you need to write your hypothesis. You're going to explain how your hypothesis directly relates to your final research question that you chose in Module 3. You're going to have to explain how your hypothesis is testable. And then how your hypothesis is falsifiable. So essentially, falsifiable just means that it can be proven incorrect. It's possible for it to not be correct, and that's okay. With hypothesis, they're either correct or incorrect, and it doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It's just a way to figure out how life works around you. So when you look at the rubric, you want to make sure that you really follow this, to the letter. So make sure that when you write your hypothesis, it's an if-then statement. Explain how it's related to the finalized question. And then how is it testable? How is it falsifiable? So let's go ahead and look at the template. All right, so here's the template. They have given you an example again. From Module 3, you'll probably recognize this because in your Module 3 activity, they said that this was going to be their final research question. So based on that question, they have to come up with an if-then hypothesis that is testable and measurable and is falsifiable, meaning that it could be proven incorrect. So their hypothesis is if the gut bacteria Faecalibacterium, say that 30 times, Roseburia and Coprobacillus are elevated, then a chronic fatigue syndrome diagnosis is more likely. Okay, so first of all, they met the criteria of it being an if-then statement. Second of all, can we test this? Yes, we can gather samples of gut bacteria and see how much is in the gut so we can see if they're elevated above normal levels. And we can see if somebody has chronic fatigue syndrome if they have this particular gut bacteria elevated in their body. However, it's considered falsifiable because it could be shown that none of those bacteria are present in somebody with chronic fatigue syndrome. So it's considered falsifiable. And that's what we're looking for is, we don't want to write our hypothesis in such a way that it's only going to produce yes results. So I'm going to show you examples of my work that I've been doing for my article about the dissolved oxygen in the fish. So I'm just going to copy and paste some information in here from a different source, just so that way I'm not having to change the screen back and forth. Okay, so we're going to first start with my final question. We talked about this last time. So I like to put the final question above, just because it helps you to see that final question to help you phrase your hypothesis. Okay, so my final question is asking, how can changing greenhouse gas emissions impact cod fisheries? All right, so what's going to happen if we keep changing the emissions? Now, my hypothesis is based on that question. and I wrote it in an if-then statement. So that's going to be answering the first question. So if greenhouse gas emissions increase, then anoxic conditions in the ocean will continue to increase and negatively impact cod fisheries. All right, so first of all, is it testable? Can we test this? Yes, we can, because we can monitor the levels of greenhouse gas emissions. We can also monitor the conditions in the ocean, and we can also monitor cod fisheries. So those are three different things that we can look at to see if things are increasing or decreasing. It's also something that we can design an experiment for, and that's the whole point of a hypothesis, is coming up with a question and then predicting what you think may happen and then running an experiment to see if it's correct or incorrect. So how is your hypothesis testable? That would be how I would explain it. Is, how can you test it? And so this is kind of where you would talk about. Sorry, I'm just taking some information out. This is where you would begin to say, I kind of like what your experimental design would be. So, my hypothesis is testable because I would monitor greenhouse gas emissions. I would also monitor anoxic conditions or dissolved oxygen conditions in the ocean. We would monitor how many fish are present versus not present. So it doesn't have to be like a big, huge experimental design. You just want to fully explain, how do we know this is testable? The question before that, explain how your hypothesis is directly related to your finalized research question. Well, it's related because I'm exploring what I was looking for. I am exploring, the greenhouse gas emissions to be changing. And I'm also looking to see if it's going to hurt the cod fisheries. So that's how it directly relates. And then lastly, explain how your hypothesis is falsifiable. So what I did here was take that out. As I wrote this, it may be possible to show that anoxic conditions may not increase or correlate with greenhouse gas emissions, or the anoxic conditions may not negatively impact the cod. So what that basically means is that perhaps the anoxic condition, this can be proven false because the anoxic conditions could be occurring by something different. Could be occurring from actually a lot of fertilizers that run off into the ocean create anoxic conditions. So maybe it's not greenhouse gas emissions that are causing it. The other thing that we could see is that when greenhouse gas emissions increase, the anoxic conditions are not present. So that would also prove this hypothesis incorrect. The other thing is that, okay, maybe the greenhouse gas emissions do increase and maybe the anoxic conditions increase, but the cod fisheries are doing fine. So that's, a couple of different ways that the hypothesis is falsifiable. So that is just what you would want to explain in that last question. Make sure that you review the resources in the module before you do this, because there is actually some pretty good readings and videos about how to develop a correct hypothesis and making sure it kind of checks all the boxes, as well as talking about what falsifiability means and how you can discuss that. As always, if you have any questions, let me know, and I will be happy to answer them. And I look forward to reading your work.